Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Betting Life Show brought to you by Fantasy Life. I'm Matthew Freedman, Matt F. the Oracle. The NFL draft ended last week. This upcoming week, we're expecting to get the NFL schedule release. So, here for a first look at the NFL futures market is friend of the show and Action Network writer, Brandon Anderson. Brandon, I believe that you crushed the futures market last year. The Texans personally bought you a small island. I know that you are in the early stages of going through the market now. So, it's more of a conversation about what we're thinking and less of a run through of all of the bets that we like. So no pressure. Any preliminary takes you have now can be disavowed later. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, glad to be on. It's the draft is in the book, so we've kind of reached the stage of all right, well, we pretty much know what we got now. Like we can kind of really dig in, start to get some fancy numbers there, start to bet on some season leaders. And yeah, like now we're in the long haul. Now we've reached the long end of the game and we can really dive in for the season. We were just talking before the show that like this is the first time that I've really like pulled up all the betting menus and been like, all right, well, let's take a look at this market. Oh, interesting. That name's a little lower than I thought. Oh, that's the favorite. And just kind of getting the gears moving. So I think that's what we're doing today. And already a few teams have caught my eye for better and for worse. And, this is the beginning. And then we kind of sharpen the tools from there and have a lot to go back and forth from over what are we still like 4 or 5 months away from getting going. But it's fun to really get the ball rolling here.
All right. Well, after the draft, you published a piece at Action that was NFL futures stock report. Some teams moved up, some teams moved down. And then, of course, you see that reflected in the odds. If we think about the draft as kind of an extension of free agency, right? Like the second chapter to like teams really trying to overhaul their roster and show us, what they are prioritizing, where they're trying to get better. We can see that the Kansas City Chiefs, since February, they have moved up in odds to win. The Falcons, the Texans, the Jets, the Eagles have moved up. And then teams that have moved down in odds to win the Super Bowl since February, the Chargers, the Jags, the 49ers, the Dolphins, and the Buffalo Bills. Out of those teams, and then of course any of the teams that you mentioned in your stock up, stock down report, what stands out to you?
Yeah, there's a few teams I want to just touch on. So we'll talk more about the Jets a little bit later. We're a bit conflicting on that one, but to me, they were I think were a draft winner in that sometimes you win by the situation around you changing. And to me, it's not just that the Jets odds went up there. Miami's odds went down. Buffalo's odds went down. New England not in the picture, but they got a rookie quarterback. They're further out of the picture now. No one really expected that anyway. So to me, it's Buffalo and Miami both lost a lot. Like they lost a lot of pieces. They salary cap, less draft so, but the draft is your chance maybe to replace what you lost, and it didn't really move the needle a lot for me. So that's I guess why they're stuck down there. And I know you came on our Action Network podcast and gave draft grades, and nobody likes the Michael Penix pick. Nobody, I don't like it. You don't like it. Nobody likes it. You compared the Fashanu pick for the Jets to a version of Penix. I actually don't agree with that one. The Jets overhauled their offensive line. I think they have a possible top 5 line now. You go get Fashanu because he has to play this year because Tyron Smith plays like 10 games a year and Elijah Vera Tucker plays only 10, 12 games a year. And like the offensive line is not quarterback. You got 5 guys out there. You can rotate in a little bit. I think he's going to play a bunch this year. I don't think that is a long-term fit. I think that is a now-term fit and getting him on the line. So I really like that specific pick for them and just kind of the overall situation. The Eagles are another winner we'll come back to, but just the fact that they got those 2 corners so cheap as they did, Quentin Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, I like that. The Chiefs are another one where, yeah, it's the Chiefs. Like, how hard is it to like the Chiefs? But for me, just looking at that division, the Chargers, I like where they're going to head with Harbaugh. Frankly, I kind of like the draft, just not necessarily right now. I think I like where they are a year from now. I'd buy like 2025 Chargers futures if they offered it, but they don't. And I don't believe in Gardner Minshew or Gardner Minshew as a rookie, aka Bo Nix. We'll get back to him as well, I know. But to me, the Chiefs look great in the division. And I don't really feel like the other AFC top teams stood out a lot. So to me, the Chiefs look great in the AFC. And here we are again, just Chiefs doing Chiefs things. So Those were three big winners that stuck out. I mentioned Penix and Falcons, like we know what that. Um, Cowboys for me are a team that, again, not just the draft, but just another team that I'm just continuing to be out on. So they were probably my biggest stock down there. Yeah, I don't really love that I kind of align with the odds that you said. Like I like to be the outlier. I like to disagree with the market, but I'm kind of down on the Niners a little bit. I'm kind of down on the Cowboys. I'm into the Jets and Eagles. So I think most of those prices moving in those directions make sense to me.
Jets and Eagles, we will definitely talk about more in a little bit. Chiefs, yeah, I really do like what they did in the draft. Xavier Worthy in the first round, he could help supercharge that offense. In the second round, and Kingsley Suamatia getting a potential starting left tackle there, and then in the fourth round with Jared Wiley, maybe getting your long-term successor at tight end to Travis Kelsey. So I do like what the Chiefs did in the draft, and I can definitely see why the odds have continued to move in their direction. Sticking with the rookies here for a little bit, offensive rookie of the year. There are a ton of options. I mean, there are always a ton of options every year, but this year especially, there are a ton of options. You have six quarterbacks going in the top 12. You have a ton of wide receiver depth. How do you start to sort through this market?
Yeah, this one is really tricky this year. We literally had the first 14 picks in the draft are offensive players. Now, granted, we're not giving it to an offensive lineman, so we can rule out a few guys there. But normally, like I have my whole criteria for what here are the five things I need in my checklist. Normally, the first thing is you want a top draft pick. You want someone in the top 12, and you're like, cool. Well, I'm down to like four guys now. Nope, not this year. I'm down to the entire first round because it's all offense this year. So there are a lot more options. I think that means we need to like wait in a little more carefully here because there are so many options. There's six quarterbacks. That's the draft. That's the story of the draft. So I think it's hard to imagine when that was the story on draft day and draft weekend, getting through the season and the story of the rookies not being a quarterback winner. It's hard to imagine that right now. But I don't know if these guys are going to start right away. And so then is it really a quarterback season in the NFL when like Penix is watching on the sidelines? And I don't know if McCarthy starts right away. It sounds like Drake May might not start it right away. And you might get down to where it's just Caleb Williams coming out of the gates. Like he's definitely going to start. But to me, I can't bet on Caleb. Only two winners in the last decade started the season plus 800 or shorter. You don't want the favorite in Offensive Rookie of the Year. That's not how this award usually goes. And I'm not saying Caleb can't win, but he's like plus 200 at books. It's way too short. It's a long season ahead. There will be other times you can bet on Caleb Williams if you like it. Or look, if he's just going to go wire to wire and win, sometimes you just can't play the market. And I think that would be the case here. If you want a quarterback, like this is a stats award. This is not necessarily a winning award. Winning never hurts, but you need the numbers. Quarterbacks that have been a offensive rookie of the year, including Stroud last year, the last six straight offensive rookie of the year quarterbacks all were top 10 fantasy quarterbacks. So to me, even though I don't really love him as a pick or even the fit and the surroundings, if I had to pick a quarterback, I think Jane Daniels because you're getting the rushing stats, and that's the floor. That's the fantasy production. We know we're going to get that. He's got really good receivers there, too. So I don't know if Washington's going to win that much. I don't think it matters for this award. So I think that'd be the quarterback that I'd look at. And then of the receivers, I just think Marvin Harrison is going to step in and have a monster season. Some of the numbers when Kyler Murray has been on the field and had a wide receiver one or his version of that last season, 2 years ago, before the injury, Marquise Brown, 6 weeks, his pace was 122 catches, 1375 yards, 8.5 scores. Marvin Harrison, pretty good, better than Marquise Brown. Trey McBride became effectively his wide receiver one this year. Week 10 forward, his pace, 113 catches, 1143 yards. I think Marvin Harrison is not going to have a lot of competition for targets. I think he's going to see a ton of passes. I kind of like that offense. They're another team I want to get to later. There's an over 1,000 yards for Harrison out there. I love that right now. That's going to go up. I think Harrison and Daniels are the guys I'm interested in, but I'm not really looking to like run out and grab too many positions because there's a lot of guys that can be in the mix here.
Yeah, I haven't ventured into this market yet. I do agree largely with a lot of what you said there. Too many good starting quarterbacks for one of them not to win this award. That's the way that I'm thinking
Yeah.
about this right now. And you think about the recent past that we have: Stroud winning over Puka, Herbert winning over Justin Jefferson, Dak winning over Zeke. It is just incredibly hard for even a really good skill position player to win this award against a quarterback, as long as that quarterback has had a good season and has started enough games. And with all the quarterbacks entering the league right now, I think one of them will, combine enough games with good enough production. I agree a lot with what you said on Jaden Daniels. I mean, I like Caleb Williams. I think he deserves to be the front runner for this
Yep.
award, but being able to bet Jaden Daniels plus 800 at the Canby books, that feels to me like the way that I would probably go in this market. I do like Marvin Harrison, but I think it will be hard for Marvin Harrison to ultimately beat one of these quarterbacks. And then, I'll kind of run through a little bit of the thoughts here. Like in a market like this, I feel like it makes sense to try to cross off as many
Yeah.
guys as you can, just to kind of sort through the guys who remain. And so Drake May, I think his offense is probably too limited for him really to have a chance to win this award. And there's no guarantee that he starts enough games either. Jacoby Brissett might end up, starting a quarter of the season, a half of the season, just so that they can kind of marinate May on the bench for a little bit. Roma Dunze, I think he could have a great season and not get credit, because if he has a great season, I think that means Caleb Williams also probably has a great season and wins the award. Xavier Worthy, I don't think he's going to get enough targets. Malik Neighbors, I don't think he's going to get enough quality targets. JJ McCarthy might not get enough starts. And then I would say all of the wide receivers outside the top three, it's just kind of like, meh. I think it will be hard for them to overcome all of the top three wide receivers, and that's not even taking into account the fact that then you have to overcome the other quarterbacks in the class. But if I had to go with one of the guys outside the top three at the receiver position, I'd say maybe Keon Coleman. Like I think there's a chance that he could end up, he's attached to a really good quarterback, and he could end up leading the Bills in targets. So maybe he could be a guy, and he's available at let me see here further down the board. Um, I feel like I should see him right now. Oh, he's available at 30 to 1.
Hmm.
Um, you know, that's that's within the realm of like, but I'm still probably not betting that. It's like it's sufficiently long, but I'm probably still not betting that. So that leaves you with Caleb, Marvin, Jaden, and then the one guy I haven't mentioned, Bo Nix. And I honestly don't know if I want to dive into that pool, but I mean, Bo Nix 22 to 1 at FanDuel. I think he's going to have the chance to start the entire season. Like that feels like a very easy projection to make. And he has, like a decent enough offensive line that's been rebuilt. He's got a coach who really seems to believe in him and is a pretty good coach for quarterbacks. Like I could see how it happens with Bo Nix at 22 to 1. I don't know if I'm going to bet it, but but it's one that like isn't an obvious cross off the list right away for me type of name.
So to your point on quarterbacks, here's how quarterbacks have been rookie of the year. 3 of the last 5 quarterbacks, 4 of the last 8 winners quarterbacks, 7 of the last 14, 10 of the last 20. Pretty consistently we're 50% hitting on quarterbacks year after year. So in a draft where we have 6 of the top 12 picks, again, that's reinforcing the quarterback theme. If you look at some of the production you need for a running back, the average over the last decade or two that wins rookie of the year, something like 1,300 scrimmage yards and 10 scores. Like you need a lot. You got to really show up here. This is not just, oh, you're in a committee and you got 1,700 yards and found the end zone some receiver, something like 80 catches, 1,300 yards, 10 scores. Like you said, Justin Jefferson didn't even win the award the year that he had it because he lost to a quarterback. That's how these often go. So I think even though I love Marvin Harrison, if I had to just pick one guy without odds, I think that would be my pick theoretically. But given what we're looking at, given his odds are shorter than what I said, the plus 800 or shorter guys don't win normally. I think that my system is going to tell me I can't bet Marvin Harrison, at least right now. I maybe add him later. Maybe he has a slow game or two to start the season. Uh, here's my problem with Bo Nix from just this award standpoint. I'm not in on Denver anyways. We're gonna come back to them, but Bo Nix again. You got to be a fantasy producer to win this award. Bo Nix is never running once this season. Like Bo Nix is not getting any rushing stats, and he might get yards, but it's going to be a lot of short stuff. It's going to be a lot of checkdowns, and it's checkdowns and short stuff to who again? Because we just got rid of everybody out of. Oh, sorry, I'm thinking of the Chargers weapons, but nonetheless, Cortland Sutton, but not a lot of other options. I agree. I like the line. I agree. I like the running backs, but I think Sean Payton does too. And I think it's more of a running team. So I think we're going to lose a bunch of rushing touchdowns probably because that's kind of how the line is built. I just have a hard time seeing a world where Bo Nix is putting up numbers to win the award. We don't really think he has much of a chance, I think, to put up like a 10-win season. I don't really think that's in the play here. So I have a hard time, even if he starts all year, I have a hard time building the case for him. To me, that's one where, oh, if it's a weak class, I can maybe build a case. But when there's going to be so many other options, all it takes is one receiver to have a big year. Like you said, Keon Coleman, a red flag on him. 17 of the last 20 winners have been first round picks. Yeah, he missed by a spot. So I don't know. That probably just counts. I think if I had to take just like a flyer down the board, maybe just Worthy from Kansas City under the premise of, Patrick Mahomes. Sure. I promise you this. If you take Worthy, the odds for him are going to go up by the end of the preseason because he's going to have like 3 explosive plays and everyone's going to be like, oh my God, Patrick Mahomes, wide receiver 1. We have to get him. Like you're going to get that. So it's now or never probably. But yeah, I think it's one of the quarterbacks. And I think it's probably to a market that we may have to kind of come back to and add positions to. And it's a build a portfolio sort of market. Um, I don't know if I need Bo Nix in my portfolio. That's all.
I mean, that's fair. As I said, I'm not sold on it either. One thing before we get to the defensive players here, to your point on Jaden Daniels, yeah, he is going to like if he hits, he is going to put up those eye popping numbers. And I'm not sold on Cliff Kingsbury, but Kingsbury was at least sufficient enough or not bad enough as an offensive coordinator to allow Kyler Murray to win Offensive Player of the Year. A few years ago. So he's at
Yeah.
least been there before. Defensive Player of the Year seems much more straightforward in that there are just far fewer defensive players who feel live for this award. Who stands out to you?
Yeah, I wrote an article night of the draft going in for Dallas Turner. Look, I'm a Vikings fan, but I am not a homer better. Like that's not how I do things. I'm a nihilist fan. I expect the worst really, so the opposite if anything. But Dallas Turner really fits the formula here. This is the award where defensive awards in general, defensive rookie of the year, player of the year, whatever sport you pick, nobody pays attention to defense. So it just goes to the favorites. It's like, oh, who did we think was good? Yeah, confirmation bias. That guy, look at that sack. He must be really good. Like that's how we do defensive awards. So for the last 5 winners here, started plus 700 or shorter. You want the favorite here. You want probably an edge rusher, somebody that's going to get to the quarterback, 7 or more sacks for 7 of the last 10 winners. And again, you want a top pick. 20 out of 24 winners have been top 15. Now, that's one dude this year. That's Latu. He's number 15. Turner's number 17. I'm calling that close enough this year. That's third defensive guy off the board. And to me, I see deja vu from last year where what happened? We had the Houston Texans went and got their quarterback and they got their edge rusher and they set them up into the system, set them up with a defensive coordinator who's going to really rush the passer. Brian Flores, my man's going to come after the passer. Led the league with 348 blitzes last season. Next highest was 288. Minnesota lost Daniil Hunter, 16 and a half sacks. They lost DJ Wanham, 8 sacks. That's 24 sacks, probably going to have to be replaced. And then even if you want to go with the deja vu thing even further, who's the man opposite Will Anderson last year, who was my pick and cashed for us? Jonathan Grenard on the other side. Who do the Vikings go get? Jonathan Grenard on the other side, right opposite my rookie of the year. The problem is Dallas Turner has seen his odds drop. That's why I wrote this the night of the draft. So I think he's mostly plus 400 some places, maybe plus 500. That's short enough at this point where, look, it's May. It's a long ride ahead. I don't know if I need to like give the books my money right now. I don't know that I see that getting much shorter before the season. So I think this is still the guy I'm going to like. And quite frankly, I don't have thoughts on too many other guys because I didn't get to go too deep on the defensive guys in the draft this year. But he just fits a lot of the profile for me, and it's hard for me to see who else is going to pop in this market before that. But probably have to wait to get a better price at this point.
I agree with so much of what you said. I think that so this is 5-1 at FanDuel. I don't think it's going to get much shorter as we progress through the summer. So I think you can probably let that number hang out a little bit. But if you look at defensive rookie of the year voting for last year, it is incredibly hard for a guy, and this is your point about it's always the favorites, it's always the guys drafted in the first
Yeah.
round who win this award. It's incredibly hard for someone like Kobe Turner, who had a really good rookie year out of nowhere to win this award. You know, he was number 3 in voting last year and a pretty distant number 3.
Mhm.
Even though I would say he was live. Like he wasn't going to win. He wasn't as good as Will Anderson, but he was fine. Like he was respectable, and he just really got no love in the voting market. Uh, this feels very much like a two-man race right now between the two guys you mentioned, Dallas Turner and Leatu Latu. And Latu is 8-1 right now at the Canby books. I do think that is bettable. The one question I would have is how is he going to be used within that Colts defense? Is he going to be a clear starter or is he going to be in more of a rotation there? Because there's Quiddy Pay, Samson Ebukam. Like there's a chance that he's not playing ahead of those guys.
Mhm.
And so I'm just a little more concerned with the Latu situation. Whereas with Dallas Turner, like I don't think he has the polish that Latu does as a pass rusher, but he certainly has the opportunity. And as you mentioned, he has the aggressiveness in his defensive play caller where he's going to get opportunities relentlessly to go at the quarterback to accumulate sacks. And sacks really do drive so much of this award. So I haven't bet it yet, but those two, I mean, I just want to say, like, you could probably do a lot worse than just grabbing the best numbers in the market right now on both of those guys and
Yeah.
then just calling it a season. So I do like those two guys and I think they will be the ones that we ultimately focus on for this award when the season is coming down the home stretch. Now, let's transition to the NFL schedule release. You know, we're not there yet. I'm going to be on a pseudo vacation back home in Texas, so not taking all of the recording equipment with me. So I won't have the show out whenever the NFL schedule is released. So, you know, we're just going to talk a little bit about the things that we might look at for the NFL schedule in anticipation of it being released and thinking about how those things might change the way that we look at some teams. And then after that, we'll talk about the teams that we might be high or low on. But Brandon, I want to get your thoughts on the things that you might look at for the NFL schedule release. I'll just, start by saying the things that I tend to focus on, um, you know, where like the things that matter, like home and away for specific teams. Now, I know it's like it feels like this probably shouldn't matter that much. Like you're playing a set number of home games, a set number of away games, but the opponents that you were playing at home and away, I think end up mattering quite a bit. So last year, the Chiefs had almost all of their tough matchups at home in the regular season. So I think stuff like that, it factors into it a little bit. Travel sequencing. Some teams, the Bills specifically last year, had a really friendly schedule of home, away, home, away. Other teams had road back to backs, 3 games in a row on the road, 3 of 4 on the road, 4 of 5, 5 of 7 on the road. Those travel sequences can end up being pretty significant. And then I'd also say within that, are there opportunities for teams to cut down on travel by staying out west or at out east if they have some back to backs where they don't need to travel back home, turn around and fly back? Distance travel. This is correlated with travel sequencing, but there's a big difference between, oh, this team is playing 3 of 4 on the road, and some of those games are out west, and this is an East Coast team versus they're playing 3 of 4 on the road, but all of those games are on the East Coast and travel actually isn't that big of a deal. Um, Division sequencing. When does a team play its divisional games? How many of them are in a tight time frame? Are they playing back-to-back divisional games? Or think of the I believe it was the Ravens last year, new coordinator. So maybe it takes them a little bit of time to get going on offense. And then they have to play all three divisional opponents within their first four games. Stuff like that can kind of matter when you're thinking about like the tail scenarios. Rest advantage or disadvantage. This is obviously a big one. Last year, Chiefs were at a rest disadvantage in almost every game after their first game back following the bye. And I kind of want to walk through the process of putting this all together because like maybe it doesn't feel like these things are really that big of a deal, but when you put all of these edges or like lack of edges together over the course of a season, it can add up to like half a game to a full game. And when you're betting on division like or like team win totals, something like that can actually matter quite a bit. Like that can be the difference between you betting on something and not betting on something. So I just want to walk through like the Giants and the like the evaluation I did of them last year with their schedule and how this put me on their under. So the Giants season opener week 1, and I'll just actually say for a minute, whether you have a statistical model that quantifies these edges for each game, or whether you just kind of walk through the schedule, look at it, and just kind of make a note of this. I think it can get you in the same place. But I tend to quantify this. But again, I think you could probably just eyeball it and be like, you know what, these are some tough situational spots. Like the situational spots, I think they ultimately do end up mattering. So the Giants last year, week 1, home underdogs against the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. So you could easily see, you know what, they could start out the season with a loss. And then after that, they played 4 of the next 5 games away. Week 2, they have to travel out west for an afternoon game against the Cardinals. And then that's followed by Thursday night football game, West Coast on the road against the 49ers. Obviously, they're going to stay out west, but even so, having back-to-back road games with only 4 days of rest is absolute murder. They come back for week 4. And so you think, okay, that's good. They played on Thursday night football. They get an extra 3 days of rest versus the opponent they're playing in week 4, and they're playing the Seahawks. So you think, okay, well, that's good. Like part of the benefit of being an East Coast team playing a West Coast team is that maybe you get the time zone advantage of that team having to play in the early time slot. But the thing is, that game was on Monday Night Football. So some of the advantage you have at home, East Coast versus West Coast, you don't have for a Monday Night Football game. And then after that, week 5 and week 6, back-to-back road games as notable underdogs against the Dolphins and Bills. After that, they get to go back home for 2 games, but their home field advantage in those 2 games is diminished because they're playing the Commanders. Home field advantage is diminished when you were playing within division, and then they're playing the Jets, where they literally have no advantage for home because they're playing a team that plays in the same stadium. And last year it was a situation where the NFC was playing 9 games on the road, 8 games at home, and then in this situation, which could have been flipped with the Jets having this as a home game, the Giants on the road, the Giants are losing essentially home field advantage for one of their 8 home games when they're already at a disadvantage of having 9 road games. So, you have 2 games at home in a row, but really limited home field advantage to no home field advantage in both of those games. And then after that comes the real kick, 3 games in a row on the road. The first traveling back out west to play the Raiders. The next game after that, playing in Dallas for a rematch. So you have to go from Las Vegas back to New York and then back west to play Dallas. And then after that, you have another road game against another team in your division, the Commanders. So playing on the road in division is tough. Playing on the road in a divisional rematch is tougher. Playing a divisional rematch on the road immediately after another road game, that's really tough. Playing back-to-back divisional rematches as the second and third games of a 3-game road trip, like that is just absolutely criminal. And so I was looking at that and I said, when I wrote this up, the Giants could easily be 3-8 and maybe as bad as 1-10 coming out of week 11. And that was the case. They were 3-8. And then the thing is, they were still another week away from getting the bye. Like they still at no point in this had the bye. And then after the bye week, they still had 2 games remaining against the Eagles. So you can look at this. And even if you're not quantifying any of it, I know I went on for a while there, but you could just look at this and be like, this is a really bad situation. The Giants could have a terrible season. And that ended up being the case. And so I think like that's the value of waiting to bet win totals till you see how the schedule is actually layered. So like those are the things that I'm going to be looking at. And for, probably like 20 teams, 24 teams, the schedule won't matter all that much. For 8 to 10 teams, it will end up mattering a lot. And those will probably be the situations where I'm looking to bet in the win total market and maybe even stretch it out into, odds to finish last in division or something like that. Or looking at the alternate win total market where you can sell a couple of wins and you're getting it at plus 250, plus 300 odds. So that's what I'm looking for when the schedule release comes out this upcoming week. Brandon, I know I just talked for a while there. What are the things that you think about when it comes to the schedule?
Yeah, I think honestly a lot of that same stuff. And to be totally honest, I don't dig in too deep into the weeds on a lot of this until I get to like August and have a better sense of where am I at on all the teams, because it's hard to do the strength of schedule thing. Like everyone will put their chart out right away the very next day. Here's your strength of schedule. Well, it's based on how the teams did last year. And that's not usually all that helpful for me because I don't think the teams are going to be what they were last year. So why do I really care that you're playing last year's hard teams when I don't think that they're going to be the hard teams this year? So yeah, I think for me, I'm looking, like you said, I'm looking for the outliers. I'm not going to do an analysis on every single team down to like, I'm not going to have a number or coefficient for each team. I'm just going to literally do the thing, like Bill Simmons on his podcast will do the thing where they'll like list off the schedule and just be like, all right, win, loss, loss. Like I want to do that with the team, especially if there's a team that I think I have a real opinion on. If I'm really leaning one way, like let's say that I want to fade a team like San Francisco or Dallas. Those are NFC teams that I'm not feeling super high on right now. Well, I want to see how the schedule starts. I want to see what you look like coming out of the gates, because if I lived in a spot where I could legally bet on Mike McCarthy to be the first coach fired, I'd be looking to fire that bet up this year, because I think the Cowboys are just a last dance in the worst way sort of team. They're running it back with no changes, nothing from the draft really, nothing from free agency. So I want to see how the schedule starts, because if you come out and you're playing, week 1 and 2 Giants and Washington, and week 3 maybe you get, I don't know, I'm trying to think of who just like the bad teams are. You get to play a team that's supposed to be in the bottom 10. All right, well, you probably at least started 2-1, probably 3-0. Like I probably can't do that bet anymore. And I probably have to kind of readjust my thoughts to, all right, well, it matters. It matters that you get a few wins to start the season. Like, not that they couldn't lose one of those games, but I don't think they're going to lose all 3 of the games. Where on the other side, if you come out and you're playing at Philadelphia week 1, a team I'm high on in the division, and now you go to San Francisco in week 2, you got 2 road games out of the gate. And now I'm like, oh, baby, like you might be 0-2 right now. And now that Washington game week 3 isn't quite so easy because it's like the must win spot and the season's on the brink. So I think, especially at the start of the year, I'm looking for how do things start for you, even just very simply. You mentioned the Texans, my Texans Island at the top of the show. A thing I struggled with last year is they started week 1 at Baltimore. That's not great. I don't want my big sleeper for the year starting with a loss on the road, which is very likely that's going to happen. They were one of the biggest underdogs in week 1. Now look, we're team content. I can't put preseason content out after week 1. I got to make my big sleeper pick before the season. But I think it made a lot of sense there to possibly wait to bet your Texans position after one game when you're almost certainly going to get a little better number. I ended up deciding, you know what? I like them enough. I think they could actually beat Baltimore. And if that happens, now I totally lose my chance. But again, you can make that decision. That's where the schedule matters, just to think it through. Just a couple other things to add. You mentioned briefly, but to me, one of the things I'm most looking at is international games. We're getting more and more of those now. Like you mentioned, you kind of mentioned like the travel, the mileage, and that sort of thing. Teams get to choose, unless it's switched. Teams choose when they are scheduled internationally. Do I want to have my bye week the week off after that, or do I want to go ahead and schedule a game? And until the last couple of years, everybody took the bye week because it only makes sense. You just like change your whole body clock to play in London for the week, and now you're back. And suddenly, last year, I think we had like 5 times where a team did not take a bye week. And a thing that jumped out to me last year, I'd never seen this with an NFL team, and ended up being a wrong read, but a thing that leapt off the page schedule wise. Jacksonville Jaguars, London's favorite team, of course, right? They went to London and then they stayed in London. They had back to back games there, which we'd never seen ever before, but they still didn't take the bye week after that. They came back, and I think they went at Indy, who was is a spot where Jacksonville pretty much always has a tough spot against with the Colts. And here you go, coming off of 2 weeks in London to go to that spot, and then they still didn't have a bye week. In fact, they played Thursday night after that. So you're on 2 international games, road game, and I think they were finally home, if I recall, but on a Thursday night against the Steelers or something. And I was just like, Jacksonville was a team I was down on anyway. That was part of the Texans position. And it turned out, I think the Jaguars won like 3 or 4 of those games. So my read wasn't right, but I looked at that and I was like, man, as an NBA fan, you get more of the schedule stuff because there's 82 games. And there's spots as an NBA fan as a better where you're like, oh, that's a schedule loss. You just like, we're not even playing our guys on that one. It's our 5th game in 7 days. You're rested. Sorry about it. We got screwed by the schedule makers here. You can't do that in the NFL when you only have 17 games. You can't just take the schedule loss. But I thought those were schedule losses for the Jaguars, a couple of them, enough so that I was like, man, I was already leaning out on them earlier. I'm really out on them now. So that's a spot, something like that to look for international travel. And then the other thing you said that I think makes a lot of sense, especially this year, is how will the sequencing play out for 6 teams in particular, 5, the teams with the rookie quarterback? Because who does Chicago play week 1? Because I get to play Caleb Williams in his first ever game. I would way rather play Caleb Williams in week 1 than Caleb Williams in week 12 or week 16 when he's had a chance to get his feet under him and figure things out. How am I betting one of those teams? If I'm betting Minnesota, if I want them as my sleeper, what's the schedule look like? When, if I were running this team, would I start JJ McCarthy? Oof, tough first 4 games. Tough beginning out of the gates. Okay, well, maybe we'll let Sam Darnold get thrown to the wolves for a few weeks. Maybe that would make a lot of sense here. And then, oh, look, they got the week 5 bye and then 2 easier games coming out of the bye. That seems like a logical place where JJ McCarthy might start playing. Okay, well, now what do I do? If I don't think Darnold's very good, I can't bet the Vikings yet. I can wait and bet them later. I can't bet McCarthy to be offensive rookie of the year if I think he's maybe not going to start until week 6. Maybe I play him later, but I certainly shouldn't bet it right now when his odds are only going to get lower there. So I think watching for that, and even too, back to division, do I get to play if I'm playing Denver? If I'm the Chiefs and I get to play Denver week 1 and 4, bring on Bo Nix, baby. I get him twice in the first month. Like Bo Nix, maybe not a good example because he's 24 already. Like the point of him is that he's supposed to be more ready to go, but still the NFL, there's still like a change in speed and everything. So I think when you play the rookie quarterback early in the season or late in the year, once they've had some chance to kind of get their rhythm, I think looking for those sort of teams, and especially with those quarterbacks this year, that will be something I keep an eye on too. So yeah, other than that, I guess I said a lot too, but I liked all of what you said. And it's definitely, you're looking for the outliers. You're looking for what jumps out to you on a schedule.
Yeah, to follow up on a few things that you said there, the exercise of going through the schedule, a lot of it is to kind of pick the spots of where do I think there might be something bettable on this team at a
Yep.
particular time in the year. I think that is a big part of it. Like, oh, this is a tough part in the schedule. If I want a future position on them, I might be looking to bet it after this stretch of games right here. So yeah, that is certainly part of it. The international part, yeah, great call out. Forgot to mention that the way that teams travel, if they are going to London early, if they're taking the bye afterwards, the Jags last year getting to stay in London and acclimate while the Bills were coming in. The Bills massively disadvantaged in that London game. That was certainly an intriguing spot. The rookies early in the season, great call out there. It would not surprise me if in weeks 1 or 2 we end up having some of these rookies playing each other as the
Mm,
league kind of
yeah.
like looks to have this situation of you have Caleb Williams going against Jaden Daniels, whatever it is, like trying to pit these rookies against each other early in the year to build some of the hype. And then you mentioned Denver, and that made me think, yeah, elevation in Denver,
Yeah.
really important if Denver can get some home games in weeks 1 and 2. I believe Denver didn't play at home last year until week 3, which at that point, the home field advantage that they have at elevation isn't as strong because the players are more in football shape by that point in the season. So yeah, just sequencing, looking at things like that. I want to get your thoughts on the teams. We talked about this a little bit. The teams that you might be high on or low on. There are some teams that I'm higher on or lower on. And, we talked about the Eagles and the Jets. Uh, I am a little bit lower on these two teams than I think you might be. And let me say, I think it makes sense when we are kind of going through teams, just thinking about like, is this a median type of team or is this a wide range of outcomes type of team? But like thinking about the tail scenarios, the best and the worst case scenarios, when I look at the Eagles right now, a win total of 10.5, I see the possibility for things to go very poorly, kind of like a continuation of what we saw last year. Now, like it's not hard to imagine how things go great for the Eagles this year because they have a lot of really great pieces. But they have had constant play calling turnover. I believe that they are now on their fifth play caller in 5 years. Uh, really negative situation. And Jalen Hurts, like I went and looked through this in the past decade, like this will be his year with a different play caller on offense,
Wow.
like just going back literally to high school. And so it would be great if at some point he could have some continuity, but the constant turnover and change on offense, I think could be a problem, especially now you have the merging of two different offensive systems. Sirianni, a West Coast guy, Kellen Moore, an Air Coryell type of coordinator. So merging those two systems together, like whose playbook is it going to be? I feel like it's going to be Kellen Moore's playbook a little bit more. Like that's the point of bringing him in as the coordinator and play caller. But that means it's not just, oh, it's West Coast system, but we're elevating this new play caller. It's kind of a new offense. So I want to see exactly how that shakes out. And then no Jason Kelsey. Like, what if the tush push doesn't work anymore? Like all of a sudden, like the get out of jail free card that you've had on third and fourth downs for the past couple of seasons, maybe that's not there anymore. So like I can obviously see how things go really well for the Eagles this year in a bounce back scenario. But I could see how things go, much poorer than people might expect. And then with the Jets, injury risk all over the roster. And, you talked about Fashanu as the draft pick there. I did not like what the Jets did in the draft. And I get your point. Like there is a non-zero chance that Fashanu ends up playing like a super majority of the games this year because of injuries that pop up. And so it might work out. But I would say like in a best case scenario for the Jets, Tyron Smith stays healthy. Morgan Moses stays healthy. Elijah Vera Tucker is able to return early in the year and stays healthy. And then that means like Fashanu basically doesn't get playing time. And so it feels weird in a best case scenario for the guy you spent the number 11 pick on to be on the bench for most of the season. Malachi Corley, I know there's a lot of hype about him. I kind of don't see that working out. Like the rookie wide receiver who's not a technician as a route runner, paired with Aaron Rodgers, like I could see how like by the third game of the season, it's just Alan Lazard back in the slot running a whole bunch of routes. Drafting a running back in the fourth and the fifth rounds just feels like overkill. And drafting your number three quarterback in the fifth round also seems like overkill. So I just look at this and it's like maybe Fashanu works out. I think he long term he could be a great player, and in the short term maybe they use him. But in the short term, if they're using him, that means one of the guys that they just brought in for the offensive line isn't playing, and that feels like something that could go poorly for them. So again, I can see the upside for both of these teams. The Jets, it could all go to well. Like, and you have Aaron Rodgers back and healthy. You've got a rebuilt offensive line with all of these new guys coming in. Maybe Malachi Corley is great, even if he's just sufficient. I don't think it really matters that much because you've got Garrett Wilson. Maybe Mike Williams stays healthy, maybe, but like you can see the bullish case for how the Jets could be like playing in a Super Bowl within a year. Like you can see it. So I'm not saying like I'm like certainly down on both of these teams. I just think that like the downside scenario for both of these teams is pretty significant. But I think you're pretty optimistic on both of these teams. Why don't you tell me why I'm wrong?
Well, so I think actually I see these two teams a little differently from each other too. So I'm gonna start with the Jets here. To me, like you're on the Jets win total under. That totally makes sense to me. I think that is the most likely outcome for this team. To me, this is not a team I want to bet the median outcome at all. If anything, I would be talked into betting Jets under 7.5 or something. Like I could see a season go very poorly for them. To me, if I'm betting, especially this early in the year, if I'm giving books money in May to hold on until January, February, I'm not looking really to bet most of the favorites here. Like that's not, I'm looking further down the board. I want to find numbers that I can only get right now that I don't think I'm getting again later. So I'm not going all the way down to the bottom of the board, but I'm not really focusing on the favorites yet. To me, the Jets are one of those teams kind of in the middle there where I don't really need to worry about the median outcome. My median outcome of my Super Bowl ticket is going to lose. That's the median outcome of every Super Bowl ticket. You're expecting to lose it. I only need to focus on the top 3 percentile outcome. And to me, the top 3 percentile outcome for the Jets, I genuinely think is as good as any team in the AFC not named Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. So you talked about the draft. I don't have any case against all the names you said. Here's who the Jets actually drafted with their draft picks that actually mattered. Aaron Rodgers, Morgan Moses, Hassan Reddick. That's the Jets draft. They traded for dudes ready to win right now. And look, Aaron Rodgers didn't play it all last year. We got like 4 snaps out of him. The Jets won the draft before the draft ever started. For right now, for me as a bettor for 2024, I don't need Fashanu to play later. If he doesn't play, I understand the logic of it. It's back to the Penix thing. But if him not playing means I got a full season out of a Hall of Fame left tackle in Tyron Smith, great. Happy to make the trade that I like magically got honestly the number one, number three, top three tackle, and Elijah Vera Tucker, same thing, like a top 5 guard probably. The Jets went from that was a shambolic offensive line. That's one of the things that I focused most on prepping for the season. They were bottom 10, quickly turned to bottom 5 and worse when their guys were getting hurt. I'm seeing them like fourth and fifth in offensive line rankings right now. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but that is a massive turnaround. And if the line is fixed, okay, now what? Brees Hall, as good a running back as anybody. Garrett Wilson is ready for a breakout. Garrett Wilson, 40-1 offensive player of the year. I think that is way too long. Haven't we seen Aaron Rodgers lighting up to his go-to guy? Why couldn't Garrett Wilson have Devonta Adams type numbers? Especially because I agree, Mike Williams not going to stay healthy all year. Garrett Wilson already they showed great timing in the preseason of those timing routes, the back shoulder, all those Rodgers classics. And then Aaron Rodgers himself, look, I know he's old. I know the Achilles and everything. I have to trust that if he was genuinely sort of maybe close to playing by December, that 8-9 months later, he should be ready to go. And I don't know that we're getting old top 3 quarterback Aaron Rodgers, but I know we're not getting Zach Wilson and Mike White and whoever else quarterback. Like to upgrade the offensive line that far and upgrade quarterback from worst in the league to even top 10 is a massive swing. I already know this is the best defense in the division. We already know the defense is great. I'm not really sure the offense isn't also the best offense in the division. In the scenario where the guys stay healthy and are out there, I just feel like the really good scenario for the Jets is really, really good. And if that's true, and if they start to look good, I'm definitely not getting good prices on tickets later. It's now or never, because as soon as the hype comes out, as soon as they like get a big upset or something, futures prices are gone. So to me, the Jets are one of those where like I'm gonna log it in the Action Network app and it's gonna just be sitting there. And the most likely scenario is we get to like week 8 and the Jets are 2-5 and somebody logs in and looks at me on the app and like, this idiot, Jets, that's his top pick in here. That's the most likely scenario. Last year, the top thing I had in my app the entire season, because I logged it right now, was Trey Lance to win MVP. Trey Lance, who didn't do anything and got traded and sat on the bench. But guess what? The Trey Lance pick is what made me later on think, you know what? I wanted the 49ers quarterback. I'm going to nibble Brock Purdy too. And he was a little further down the list and he didn't win either. I lost both tickets, but it was a pretty good ticket to have there. So you're betting futures and long shots. You got to be willing to look like an idiot. And the Jets are most likely going to make me look like an idiot. But I think if it goes well, it's going to go really well. The Eagles, to me, I don't know fit that scenario. The Eagles for me are a bet on organizational stability. I just believe in who they are and Howie Roseman and what that team is doing. They constantly invest in the trenches. And I know Kelsey is gone. I know Hassan Reddick is gone, but they bring in Bryce Huff. They're focusing on the line. They drafted a couple of guys there. I'm Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach, is the best in the league. He's going to have those guys ready. I know it's still not the same without Kelsey, but that's going to be stable there. I'm not the biggest Saquon Barkley guy in the world, but adding him in as an upside element to just bust off a long one every now and then, because you've got great wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. Jalen Hurts had a down season last year, but I don't think was ever really healthy. I don't think he was probably as good as we all thought 2 years ago, but I don't think he's as bad as we thought last year either. I think he's going to be somewhere in between. So probably Aaron Rodgers range, right? Like bottom of the top 10 sort of range. And I just feel like the Eagles are a team that I'm willing to invest in. I believe in everything that they're doing. As far as the coordinator changes go, I think what you said is fair. Constant change is not great. The change from last year's coordinators, great. I don't want those guys in my life anymore. Get them out of here, especially when the previous years guys both went on to become head coaches. I know Kellen Moore is a good offensive coordinator. I know Vic Fangio is a great defensive coordinator. It might take some time. Maybe this is a team that I'm going to decide I should come back to later. Maybe they're a slow starter, but to me, I just believe in what they are. I think, too, the story of the season last year until the playoffs was the Baltimore Ravens. And the story was, look at the coordinators. Look at what we've done. We got Mike McDonald on the defense. We got Todd Monken on offense. We brought in these new names, even though John Harbaugh, good coach, they're not really his thing. They brought in a different style to inject some life into the team. And I think if the Ravens finish the job, I think we're thinking of the Eagles a little differently, because they're the next Ravens sort of team to me. Again, organizational stability, quality quarterback, believe in the trenches, and get those new voices in. So I want the Eagles median. I think, too, I'm fading the Cowboys. I'm not that worried about the Giants or the Commanders. I think they'll be better this year, but, let's be real. So I like the division at plus odds, NFC and Super Bowl odds. Nick Sirianni, 40-1 coach of the year. I think that could be in play if they just have another big year. And it's like, man, the Eagles sure seem to get back there year after year. So the Eagles to me are a team that I'm never going to be too upset with the Eagles franchise right now, with me being like, my money's in on the Eagles. What am I going to do about it? Because I get a chance to fade the Cowboys. Frankly, I get a chance to fade the 49ers, who a little bit feel like the Cowboys thing of like, oh, we're just running it back. That's the plan here. I like better what they're doing. But those are the two teams for me right now. They're my teams. They're the teams I'm wanting to invest in, and they're who I believe in until we see otherwise.
All right, a couple more teams here for me to hit, and I'll say, um, thinking about how to use the different markets. So if you are pessimistic on a team, there aren't all that many ways for you to bet into it. Really the main way to bet into it is taking the under on the
Yeah.
win total. And then maybe there's some alternate markets that pop up where you can bet on a team to finish last in division or something like that. But if you have a negative read on a team, not that many ways to bet on it. If you have a positive read on a team, there are a ton of ways to bet into that. And I do think in those scenarios, it makes a lot more sense to focus on the upside, the best case scenarios versus just betting the over on the win total. A couple of teams who do stand out to me looking at their win totals: Broncos 5.5, Vikings 6.5. I haven't bet the over on either of those. I'm going to kind of wait to see how the schedule unfolds. Wait for this market to open up a little bit more. But I'm I think I'm going to be on the optimistic side for both of these teams. Part of it is the rookie quarterbacks, so you're already in an area of more uncertainty, more volatility. I think that lends itself more to like an upside type of bet. I mentioned earlier, I do like the idea of Bo Nix with Sean Payton, even if I am not sold on the idea of Bo Nix on his own. The offensive line has been rebuilt, and then really, I don't have much faith in Las Vegas, and I could see a situation where the Chargers are a little bit overhyped entering this year. Like, and it makes sense. Like long term, I think the Harbaugh hire was a good one, but I think there could be a situation where people are just a little too optimistic on what the Chargers might do in their first year. And so thinking about a potential division bet, like maybe to finish second in division, the Broncos, something like that. I think I could be optimistic there. And then the Vikings have been very good under Kevin O'Connell, especially when they've had their quarterback situation buttoned up. So Kirk Cousins, when he was there healthy, I mean, the Vikings were a good team, and JJ McCarthy. I know like people don't want to talk about like quarterback wins, but like he's won everywhere he has been. Or another way of phrasing that is like he has played sufficiently well enough for his teams to be able to win with him at the quarterback position. And I think we could see that continue with the Vikings. And then I just look at the NFC North, and it just feels totally wide open between these four teams. Like I know the Packers are great. They really came on last year, but I don't think they're really all that much better than the Vikings. The Bears, the Lions. I mean, yeah, there's reasons to be enthusiastic about all the other three teams, but I just think that enthusiasm for those other three teams is creating a situation where the Vikings are probably being a little bit underappreciated relative to the talent that they have on the coaching staff and the personnel there. So I think I will probably be optimistic on those two teams. Again, just waiting for the schedule and thinking about the best way to bet into that optimism. Brandon, any other teams that you want to talk about here that you might be high or low on?
Yeah, I think what you said on those two teams makes sense. I think the Broncos just are a floor raised team, so I think your position is good. I'm just not super excited to be sitting like a win and a half away in December and need Bo Nix to get me over the line. Like I think he probably does. I just don't need it. The Vikings, I agree. To me, one of the best futures prices out there right now is that the Bears are plus odds to miss the playoffs, and I think that is ludicrous to have a rookie quarterback coming in who we've never seen, and it's not even really a bet against him. The Packers and the Lions are big minus odds to make the playoffs. The Vikings, I agree with what you said. I think that they are a quality team and going to be tough in the mix. I think the Bears are far more likely to finish last in the division than they are to win the division. Plus odds to miss the playoffs. Go back and look at what the number one pick does for a record in their first season. I know normally that's because you're going to the team that just lost a lot of games, and the Bears are a little different. Bears lost plenty of games. Like I don't see that one. So to me, I agree with your Vikings take as tepidly as I can as a Vikings fan, but I think fading the Bears is a good way to do it. Here's the team that look. This is really just a last 24 hours thing. As I was starting to think about this podcast, I'm gonna. You told me before I can throw out a thing and back off it later. So this is my one. This is my throwing it out there, and I don't even know if I believe in it yet. May I invite you to Cardinals Island? I think the Arizona Cardinals might be a team to get excited about next year. I really liked Drew Petzing and the offense last year. I really liked what he did with them. They were over the back half of the season, they were the number one rushing team. Like they were really chewing teams up, running the football. They moved the ball efficiently enough passing wise. And now you get Marvin Harrison Jr., a guy obviously talked up earlier, super high on him. You get a clear target. You also get Kyler Murray, who I think, again, We talked about those like the Hurts and Rodgers back end of the top 10 quarterbacks. I think we have to believe Kyler Murray is at least around that range. I'm not really too sure where he's at, but isn't there a world where Kyler Murray could have a Lamar Jackson-ish type season if things go really well and he gets some rushing yards and he puts up big passing yards? Now, I don't know if I believe in the defense here. I frankly, I don't know a lot about the defense, but that probably makes Kyler do even more things. So, couple bets just to look at here. I was looking at the MVP board, looking down the list. Again, I don't need the favorites yet. I think Mahomes is probably the right ticket to buy at some point because of all I said about the Chiefs. I think Aaron Rodgers, 28 to 1. I think it's a terrible price. He's 13th in MVP odds. It's right below Tua Tagovailoa. He's right ahead of Matt Stafford, Anthony Richardson, and his no games completed for his career, and Kirk Cousins, who might not even be able to start and is coming off an Achilles himself for the Falcons. Don't put Aaron Rodgers in that group. Don't insult me. I just think that's way too low. But I got further down the list, and I needed my Trey Lance. I needed Trey Lance to look stupid at the top of my futures. Kyler Murray, 60 to 1. Kyler Murray, the last time that he was healthy, mid-season, was the MVP favorite. Now, I thought that was terrible. I don't think he should have been the MVP favorite. 60 to 1 is an insane price for a quarterback this talented, a former number one pick on an offense that I think is going to be up and coming with Drew Petzing that has a star receiver now. The run game is going to be good. You want a running quarterback that opens up the running game. And again, defense maybe not great, probably helps the MVP case because you got to do even more and you got to keep getting into shootouts and that sort of thing. I don't know if he's going to win. I don't know, but that number seems way too long to me. 13 to 1 in the division. I'm kind of looking to fade the 49ers. The Rams are tough. The Seahawks, I think, are still going to be good. Mike McDonald, I like him as a hire there. I don't know. I wanted a long team. I initially looked at the Panthers just because that division sucks, but I can't do David Tepper. I can't do Bryce Young yet. Like, I think there's a Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer sort of upside to them, but not enough of it. Like, I think they're like an over team, not necessarily a long shot team. Cardinals Island, I think I can get behind that. What do you think about Cardinals Island for 2024?
I like this. I like this as like the thought exercise. And then like I can actually start to get on this. Yeah, Kyler Murray 60 to 1 at the Canby books. We have at Fantasy Life a magazine, a fantasy magazine that's going to be coming out at various times during the summer. And so I've written blurbs looking at the various offensive units for this. And when I got to the Cardinals, I noticed they were number 9 in the final 8 games of the season last year when Kyler Murray came back. Like they were looking kind of like a top 10 offense. And I would say like that's without a lot of talent on the
Mhm.
offense. So now you have, an even healthier Kyler Murray. You have an offensive coaching staff that is entirely intact from last year, which I think is really significant that as not just the offensive coordinator, the entire coaching staff can really build into the second season there under this tenure. The offensive line is a liability, but at least it has continuity. And you added Marvin Harrison. You still have James Conner, who is, I think, a very capable 3-down veteran back. You added some insurance behind him in case he gets injured. You have a breakout tight end candidate. Yeah, I mean, the offense, like, I think it could collapse on itself under like uncertainty, or it could catapult itself into the top 10. Like, it's a wide range of outcomes with this offense. And so leveraging into that with 60 to 1 for Kyler Murray, I think is really intriguing. So I do like that. All right, we're getting up against it. Brandon, I know you're going to have more content coming out as the offseason rolls on and we start to approach the season. Anything in particular that you want to tell people to keep an eye out for?
I don't think so. Just keep an eye out at Wheaton Brando on Twitter, at Wheaton Brando in the Action Network app is where my picks are tracked. All my articles, all my picks, podcasts, etc., are all up at my Twitter, X, whatever the heck that we're calling it these days. I'll be on the Action Network podcast for NFL coverage. I'm on Buckets podcast right now for NBA. I maintain being a two sport athlete, which is part of why this NFL stuff was a little fresh still today, because I am deep in the throes of NBA playoffs. So you can find a lot of stuff there on buckets. And, rooting for Timberwolves right now. Minnesota, our second time in franchise history winning a actual playoff series in a season. So, maybe the next time I come on, you'll be talking to an NBA champion Minnesota Timberwolves. I will buy all the gear in the world if that happens, because it's never happening again. So, yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Fun to talk football, fun to get into the flow of things. And we got a long ways to go, but, it's good to get started on things.
Well, awesome having you on the show. Best of luck to your Timberwolves as long as they do not play the Mavericks at any point in the playoffs. Then at that point, we might be on opposite sides. But awesome to have you on the show. That is going to do it for this episode of the Betting Life Show, brought to you by Fantasy Life. Please subscribe to the show as well as the newsletter. Tell your degenerate betting friends. Join the Discord. See all of our bets in the free Fantasy Life Bet Tracker, and follow us on social media at Wheaton Brando and Matt F. the Oracle. Thank you, and see you again next episode.